A bright, sunny day in March, early March, and you go outside and you look up at the blue sky and you take a deep breath. I can smell spring. Now there's going to be dirty snow on the ground, icicles dripping from the roofs, but you've got hope. And the nights are cold, the days are warmer, and the sap is coming up in the trees. And all the farmers are beginning to tap their maple trees. It's not difficult, I guess. You bore a hole in the tree, put in a spile. It's a little hollow thing. They used to use wooden things, but now they can use metal. Hang a bucket on, and the sap will flow. Now it takes 40 buckets of sap to make 1 bucket of syrup. That's why it costs so much. But it's wonderful. The farmers are all busy doing that, and my grandfather was no exception to the rule. My grandparents had a farm north of Hastings on M50, and my sister and I just loved to go out to the farm any time of the year. But for me, this was my favorite time. We'd get a letter from Grandma and it said, "Grandpa's tapping the trees. We're going to sugar off this weekend. Come." Yes! I could hardly wait for the weekend to get here. We'd get there and Mom would help Grandma in the kitchen. Dad and I and my sister would bundle all up because it's cold in the woods, go up the hill past the barn, past the strawberry patch, the cornfield, come to the windmill, hang a left, follow the lane to the woods, the sugar bush. Now, I don't know why we call it a sugar bush, because you don't tap bushes. Sap doesn't come out of the bushes, but Michigan farmers have to call their maple woods sugar bush. We'd go, as we approached the woods, we could smell the wood smoke. We could smell the sap boiling, and oh, did it smell good. And as we got a little closer, we could see the sugar shanty and the smoke coming out of the chimney, and maybe an uncle or two gathering wood to go in and stoke the fire under the sap. And then we'd see Grandpa. He was with the horses. Somehow those horses were all named Prince and Fanny. I never could figure out how he had so many horses named Prince and Fanny when he only had two teams, but when they changed, they'd still be Prince and Fanny. And they were so smart. They knew which tree to stop at. And, Grandpa was the horses were pulling a stone boat with a tank on top. If you don't know what a stone boat is, it's kind of a flat sled. In the summer, the farmers clear their field of rocks with a stone boat. In the winter, they put a tank on, and they stop at every maple tree, empty the bucket into the tank. And the horses just were so smart. Grandpa hardly had to say anything, just kind of a little gentle, yep, whoa back. Gee, ha. Donna, get out from behind those horses before you get kicked. So we followed along, and Dad would help empty the buckets into the tank. And when the tank was full, we'd go to the sugar shanty, big tank at the back of the sugar shanty. And the little tank was emptied into it. There was a pipe going from that tank into the sugar shanty, and a spigot on the end. 2 big evaporator pans, probably like 6 by 4, something like that. Fires underneath it, ready to boil the sap. It was magic. When my uncles were walking around and there would be clouds of steam, you could hardly tell who they were. And they'd be stoking the fire and long paddles stirring the sap and the syrup. When the first they had hygrometers too to check the density. It had to be a certain thickness before it could move. The first pan had the sap boiled a certain length of time, got a certain thickness, and then another spigot lowered it into the lower pan, and then it got to another thickness, and when it was just right, it was emptied into cans to be taken to the farmhouse where Grandma finished the job. We'd go to the farmhouse, and there stood Grandma in front of a big old wood cook stove. By wood, I mean it wasn't made of wood, it was fueled by wood. There was no gas to turn on or electricity to bump. It was work. There were kettles of syrup boiling on the stove, and above the stove was a big felt bag, about this big around, and all the syrup that came from the woods had to be filtered through this bag to make sure there were no crystals that had formed during the cooking process. It was a lot of work, and when it was all filtered through, Grandma would can it up in sterilized cans for sale. They had quite a good business going for their maple syrup. But this was sugaring off Sunday. There was a special kettle of syrup just for us. And Grandma would boil it, and when it got to just about the soft boil stage, she'd hand each of us a bowl, a buttered bowl, and a spoon. There was Mom, my sister, me, and a bunch of cousins. And we all had a bowl. Grandma would ladle some into the bowl, and she'd say, beat the tar out of it. And we'd just go like crazy. Our wrists were ready to drop off. And when it got thick and turned a little bit white, we'd pour it into a sugar mold. She'd have them all lined up on the table, and we'd choose our favorite one for our own special sugar cake. Sometimes we didn't beat it quite that much, and we poured into a bowl of black walnuts, stir it around, or we'd bring in some clean, fresh white snow and drizzle it on that for a taffy treat. Now, my cousins and my sister really loved the sugary treat. For me, not so much. What I liked was the magic out in the woods. I loved going behind the horses, not too closely, following Grandpa around, watching them pour the sap in, watching it boil, watching the fires go underneath. It brought forth every sense that you had. The coolness in the woods, the odors of the smoke burning, the fires burning, and the sap cooking, and the camaraderie of seeing my family all working together on a project. That was special. But there was this amazing phenomenon of watching clear liquid turn into gold. Thick maple golden syrup. Michigan gold. Pure Michigan.